All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for the May 2020 meeting of the Freight Advisory Committee. As always, we will start with introductions. So while we're going around the room, if folks online could put your name, title, and what organization you're with in the chat, I'll read those out after we do the in-person introduction. So I am Ethan Townsend with the Capital Region Transportation Council. One of the hats I wear here is our freight program coordinator, so that's why I host these meetings. Adam.
Adam McCarville, Transportation Council.
Ghislaine Gispal with CDRPC. I just stepped into the planning and economic development role there, so I'll be their representative.
Peter Comenza with the town of Rotterdam.
Ed Thompson, private citizen, DOT retiree.
So John Schneiderwin, I'm with Port of Olney.
Awesome. And then we have quite a few folks joining us online. So we have Guadamani with FHWA, Tom Phelan with BHX, Jeff with RPI, Fernando with the US EPA, Kim Lambert with Saratoga County, Valerie Dean with DOT Region 1, Dr. Lawson at UAlbany, Jacob Beeman with National Grid, Bill Trudeau with the City of Albany, Scott Wigger with the Railroads New York, William Fitzgerald with DOT Region 1, David Sawitz with Market 32 / Price Chopper, Caitlin O'Connell, plumber with Wigger and Homan, and then quite a few other people. We have a couple folks with Transportation Council, Parker Morris, Christy Shea, Martin Hole. Just trying to look through the list for folks whose names are on the list. We have John Scavo with Town of Clifton Park, Jacob Beeman with National Grid, and I might have missed a person or two, but I think we got pretty much everyone. So for folks online, just our regular meeting notes, keep your microphone muted unless you have something to say, so don't pick up any background noise. If you do have something to say, feel free to chime in, or if you raise your hand or put a message in the chat, I'll see those as well. And for everyone's note, as always, this meeting is being streamed live on YouTube and a recording will be available after the meeting. So do a quick review of our agenda for today. Now that we've finished the welcome and introductions, we're going to go into our feature presentation from Tom Phelan at BHX Engineering, who's going to be talking to us about the proposed Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern merger and what it might mean for where it's at in the process, what it might mean both for the railroad network at large and some of the implications for our region, even though neither of those railroads have a really big presence here in our region. Then we have a couple of quick discussion items, and then we will have our regular participant updates section. So I will turn it over to Tom now. I'll stop sharing my screen so he can share his.
All right, let's see. You folks see the screen here?
Loading on our end. Yep, we got it.
All right. Okay. Well, thanks, folks, for the introduction and for the this is a subject that's been kind of lurking beneath the surface over the last, gosh, almost a year now. And of us who have worked in the freight transportation consulting world have kind of sensed that something like this was eventually going to happen. What we're looking at, proposed merger between Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern, one of the large Class 1 railroads in the Western U.S. with one of the large Class 1 Eastern U.S. to create what would be the first single continental railroad with single railroad service from the east to the west. This first hit the news last year, and it's gone through a couple different steps in the process that is very typical of a merger and the approval process that's required at the federal level, which I will talk about in a couple of minutes. Basically, what we're looking at here is the establishment of a massive railroad network across the entire country, east coast to west coast, from the Gulf of Mexico up to Canada, and very potentially major changes to the rail system as a result of this, if it is approved. I want to give you just some fast facts related to this proposed merge. Start with this big disclaimer in bold text and highlighted here to just clarify, make sure everybody understands here that these are a piece of information made by Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern in their application. And so, as you can expect, these pieces of information are given the intent of promoting support for the merger. The way this process works is once the two companies come to an agreement to have an acquisition or a merger through their own corporate processes, like any other merger or acquisition in the U.S. corporate world. Because of the nature of this business, they have to go through a review and approval process with the U.S. Surface Transportation Board. And the board will go through. They have a very defined timeline here as to what steps are taken in the process. And I'll talk a little bit about slides here. But basically, the purpose STB review is not to determine if this merger is good for these railroads. It's really to look out for the interests of the shipping community, the customers of the industry, as well as the economic interests of the nation at large, including various stakeholders. And stakeholders range from railroad customers to short line railroads to other railroads. Most, if not all, of the other Class 1 railroads will weigh in on this and give their own on it. And that tends to be a very interesting, delicate process. Very often those railroads may have interest in themselves in possible mergers and down the road. But then also stakeholders like your local communities. What are the implications for areas that have rail service through one of the companies, or potentially a competitor, or potentially a short line that connect to one of them? So they've listed a whole series of positive benefits of this merger. I won't go through every single one of them here, but you can see that there's a focus here on improving areas served by the existing railroads, improving the efficiency of the operation, converting truckloads from road to rail is a selling point in these mergers, as well as obviously the environmental impacts as well. They talk a lot about in their forecasts that are in application how many potential new carloads they would expect to haul as a compared to the two separate ones. The second bullet point here is a one because of the nature of the network here. They claim that they would have limited implications, limited competitive that they claim that only 3 of the 20,000 customers railroads are currently accessible to both railroads. So those are the customers that would have the most, that they now have competitive rail service, and they would lose it if these two customer railroads merge. So this is what we call an end-to-end merger. This isn't like two works. For example, if CSX and Norfolk Southern were to propose a merger, those networks overlap across the eastern U.S., and that would be an network merger. This is end-to-end, meaning the vast majority of the customers of the rail system today, they have access to UP or NS or another Class 1, not to multiple ones. Most customers do not necessarily have access to railroads. So here, they're presenting this as a case where there are serious competitive, there's no loss of competitive rail service on a grand scale here, other than for these 3 of the 20,000 customers. They do provide examples of these of service. They always focus on union jobs, results or gains as a result of a merger, because the labor unions that represent these railroads will weigh in and have something to say about this proposed merger. I highlighted that last bullet point there about the size of UP is a massive railroad in the West. I can tell you, being out here in the West this morning, Western Canada. The spaces, there's a lot of space out here. There's long distances between. There are a lot of track miles on a Western railroads network compared to an Eastern, where the states are more compact. The rail system is more compact. So even though between the two railroads, in effect, it's a combination of one very big railroad here. So there may be a tendency to assume, correct, but in the industry, we may have a tendency to assume that this would be dominated by the U system based on the size of their network today. So I would just leave it at to talk about a couple of things that relate to the sizes of the railroad and their customer bases. Just here showing a map of the Norfolk system in New York State. We heard earlier that Norfolk Southern does not have a major presence here in New York. I've given a similar presentation here in Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania and Norfolk Southern State. It's the opposite in Pennsylvania. Norfolk Southern is the one railroad. CSX has a secondary presence there. In New York, is what we would call this a CSX state. Mainly, if you look at the history of the Conrail between Norfolk Southern and CSX, in effect, when it comes to it was almost a reversal of the 1968 consolidation of the New York Pennsylvania railroads to create the Penn Central. Norfolk Southern acquired what was mostly the railroad system, and CSX acquired what had been the New York Central system, including route from across the center of upstate New York from Buffalo over to south the area and then down along both sides of the Hudson River to New York City. So this is an important graphic to show because not only does Norfolk Southern not have presence here, this is also at the far northeastern reaches of its system. They don't have direct mainline service through the Albany area, except through their joint venture, which is not compared to other mainline routes across the country, is not heavily trafficked as, say, the CSX River line down to Norfolk Southern main line on the Pennsylvania route across Pennsylvania. So just the context, the impacts in this region and upstate New York in general are mainly going to be on local customers that are served by Norfolk Southern here in this far of its the far northeastern reaches of what would be a merged railroad that covers the entire U.S. Potential implications here. There may be some potential price advantages for Norfolk Southern customers that today, if you have a customer in this area that is getting car loads up through Binghamton on Norfolk Southern, if it's a carload that starts in the west and is moved across to an interchange point, Chicago or Kansas, from either your Union Pacific or the Burlington Northern Santa Fe, the other Class 1 railroad, and it's Norfolk Southern, and it's brought up here, there might be some economies of scale here. There might be some improved structures there with the local Norfolk Southern. That is still to be seen. We'll see how that works out. There are some possible impacts. I would even call these likely impacts on customers and short line railroad. I bold-faced this one that we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes here. Are there potential in service levels for interchanges with short line railroads? How frequently is it served today versus how frequently may they be served in the future if they are served by a larger railroad? Impacts on freight rates to short line customers. For better or for worse, we don't know this. One of the possible implications would be what conditions could be attached to this merger if the Surface Transportation Board approves of it. And it's not unusual. In fact, I'd say that's pretty much the norm. And very often in the process, when the public and industries and stakeholders provide their input into the process, there are generally three that a respondent will give. They'll either support the merger, they'll oppose it, or perhaps the most response is to support it with conditions. So somebody might say, hey, I'm an industry, I'm a Pennsylvania or New York or Alabama, and I support the merger with this condition, and that my area remains served on a regular trains or whatever through this yard for at least the next 5 or 10 years. It's a response that's given in the STB review process. We could have some potential adverse impacts to current or future passenger rail service on shared. I don't believe that's the case here anywhere in upstate New York on Norfolk Southern. I could be wrong, but I do know that this is an issue in other regions where Amtrak, for example, or a local municipal transit rail system is sharing track with a Class 1 that changes in freight traffic could potentially have the rail service, the passenger rail service on that. And then I also bolded this last one because this is probably one of the most important lessons that was learned after the Conrail acquisition by Norfolk Southern and CSX in the late 1990s, which we use for guidance because that was the last big Class 1 railroad acquisition or merger in the industry for this region. So it was almost 30 years ago, but in fact, it's the most recent example we have. And there were some changes that came out of that merger that were unexpected for most of us who were working at the time and seeing how it played out at a local level. Positive in some respects, but negative in other respects, as we'll see here. So let's just talk about, say, changes in interchange service levels here. I'm giving an example here of an industry. It just so happens to be out in the Quad Cities area of Iowa. PB Minor is a manufacturer of food products and cosmetics and pharmaceuticals. And they get rail service off of Spur Line here. I highlight the bottom area here just to show you that this facility is designed and the connecting track here, the siding is laid out in a way to accommodate their manufacturing operations and the requirements they have to bring inbound materials in on. These are tank cars, and they're stacked on this siding. And the siding is laid out, and the facility is laid out in such a way that they offload materials from these tankers over time, and they use it to feed their manufacturing process. I don't know any details about this other than what I can see on the aerial photo, what I know about the industry and what I know about the region. But here, let's just say, for example, that this facility is served by the Class 1 railroad, and they get carloads delivered here 3 times a week. Their process is based on getting a certain number of cars 3 times a week. They offload them, they empty them, and then they're taken out and replaced with the next set of cars 2 days later. Say they get served on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And their manufacturing process works this way. The carload, the tanker cars are effectively storage on site until they are offloaded. And then think of this as a conveyor belt where the materials come in and they feed the process. It's very typical of a manufacturing process. One of the issues you have with a major railroad merger is that the importance of this customer is going to change. There tends to be a focus with these big railroads on their biggest customers. So let's just say Union Pacific devotes a lot of time, energy, and highest levels of service to their 25 largest customers. And say Norfolk Southern would do the same thing with their 25 largest customers. You put these 2 railroads together, and then suddenly you may not be one of the 25 largest customers anymore. Suppose that the 10th largest customer for Norfolk Southern ends up being the 20th or 25th or 30th largest customer of the merged system. Suddenly, the combined railroad, the new UP-NS railroad, may not be configuring their operating plan to serve customers like this with the same frequency. Suppose they make a decision that they're only going to bring carloads here twice a week or once a week. Suddenly, you can't just have 5 carloads here on this siding. You may need to have 10 or 15 of them if the load has to last for a full week as you offload it. Does this facility even work in this configuration? Do they need to reconfigure the track alignment on the site? Will there be a need for a major capital investment at this facility, or potentially even a displacement of this industry because the rail service changed? They don't have the track alignment set up, and they don't have their on-site facility set up in such a way to accommodate 15 carloads at a time or 10 carloads at a time, whereas everything here is set up for 5. This is an overly simplified example, and I'm just using this to explain what may happen here at a very local level that you don't necessarily think about when you think of rail service and just seeing trains going by on a main line, going from a yard to a yard, and then you just you drive past a site like this and you see rail carloads on the siding without necessarily understanding how this ties into the supply chain for this particular customer. Just something to think about. If I am PB Line or an industry like this, and I'm a Norfolk Southern customer, which this one is not, I may post a response to the STB. We support the merger. However, please ensure that we still get our 3-day carload a week. That has to be a condition of the merger attached to this for a minimum of the next 10 years, or if not longer. So that's one possible implication. This one is a case study that we dealt with in northern New Jersey, a very interesting one. What we have seen here over time is that I show a traditional boxcar on the left side here and a double stack intermodal train on the right side. Very often there's a lot of overlap between these two. The boxcars, we call the manifest freight, and the intermodal customers are basically the same type of industry. The types of commodities, the products that are moved in a boxcar could just as easily be moved in a shipping container. And one of the trends we have seen in the railroad industry over time is that boxcar traffic has diminished as intermodal traffic has grown, simply because of the flexible nature of intermodal service, that you can take an intermodal container and you can provide service to a customer that does not even have a siding, so that covering that last mile or last 10 miles or 20 miles of a 1,000 or 2,000 mile trip can be done economically here with the shipping container. A lot more flexibility in the intermodal business than in the boxcar business. We had a case in northern New Jersey. This is the Toys R Us, the former Toys R Us, the defunct Toys R Us distribution center in Mount Olive in western Morris County. This was built sometime in the early 90s. It may have been built in stages between the late 80s through the mid 90s. It's about 1.2 million square feet. I'm going to add a little highlight here that when they opened this facility, they were getting a lot of boxcar traffic off the Highbridge branch, which is a freight industrial track that's owned by Morris County, New Jersey. They had the foresight in the 1980s when Conrail was abandoning and selling off many of its assets. They acquired this line from Conrail to protect industries there were 3 branches that they eventually acquired through the 1990s. This is one of them. The goal of Morris County was just to protect the current industries that relied on the rail service so that they would continue to get rail service, and they have an operating agreement with the Short Railroad. So Morris County went out and they got a CMAQ grant in the mid-90s to restore the track and the ballast along this Highbridge branch, and it allowed Toys R Us to get boxcar loads of traffic in, sourced from places all over North America, as close as Ohio, mostly from Southern California and Texas, to support their customer, their stores all over the Northeast. So they had a rail siding built here when they constructed the building. And at the time, if I recall the information correctly, they were getting about 500 carloads a year into this place. I might be wrong about that, but it was something of that scale. It was hundreds of carloads a year. And 500 is 10 a week, which is not a small customer for a short line railroad that's providing interchange service from Class 1 here to this location. Now, after Conrail was sold off to Norfolk Southern and CSX in the late 1990s, their boxcar traffic started to decline almost immediately. And what had happened here was that because the Northeast now had competitive rail service, whereas Conrail was a single carrier that would serve all of pretty much most of the region, with some small exceptions, that the rates for intermodal rail service declined dramatically because now you had 2 railroads competing for the same business. And as a result, intermodal service began to get cheaper. We saw more intermodal trains, double stack container trains getting moved into northern New Jersey. And then eventually this facility pretty much abandoned its boxcar rail service, and they were getting served almost exclusively by intermodal through intermodal containers. So I spoke to a representative at this facility on a project I was working on around 2010, and I asked the question, "Why don't you get rail service anymore?" I kind of knew the answer, but the response I got was interesting. He said, "We get more rail service today than ever before." But he was counting this intermodal service as rail service because that it was basically a train that brought it to the terminal in South Kearney. They weren't getting deliveries right to the door. So for the first 2,000 miles of the trip, these intermodal containers are still on a train. But for the last 20 miles and on the local roadway system, it's a truck trip. So when you looked outside their facility in 2010, when it was still open, there were shipping containers on chassis all over the place. They were getting tons of deliveries here through intermodal service. Here, the service on the main line, the traditional rail service declined simply because of a change in the business atmosphere. Another implication here is something else that happened that even made this or even more rapid was that Pennsylvania went through the process to clear the former Pennsylvania Railroad main line for double stack service. So you had more efficient rail service across Pennsylvania for intermodal trains. So not only did you have two railroads, now you had more efficient, better, more capacity on one of the two than you had when it was Conrail before 1995. So these I just put out here as just some thoughts here as to what the process could, how this could unfold, what the implications may be for regions that are currently served by Norfolk Southern. The process, the timeline here, that started last summer with the $85 billion agreement announced publicly. They did get shareholder approval from both companies, 99% approved in November. They formally filed, the two companies formally filed a merger application with the Surface Transportation Board in December of 2025. I did look at this. It's nearly 6,700 pages in length. I promise you, I did not read every page, but I did read the executives. And in January, the STB rejected the initial merger application. They described it as incomplete because it was missing sections of the merger agreement, and they wanted a more robust analysis of the actual potential market share and how many truckloads would be diverted. Just last week, 2 weeks ago, that the amended application was filed by Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern with the Surface Transportation Board. Once the STB announces that they've accepted the application as complete, it will trigger a 45-day public comment period during which any interested stakeholder, could be a state DOT, New York State DOT may file a response, Pennsylvania DOT may file a response, governor's offices, legislative bodies often file responses here. I do know for the Conrail merger in the 1990s, Pennsylvania filed 3 separate responses. The DOT, the governor's office, and a state legislative transportation committee filed their own separate responses and were collectively referred to as the Pennsylvania. So once that 45-day public comment period commences, I would expect to hear some news maybe within your governing bodies, within your legislative bodies, your executive offices at the local and state levels about how they may want to respond and give their input on this. Do they support it? Do they oppose it? Or do they support it with conditions, whatever the case may be? Any questions at all? I went through this fairly quickly. There's a lot of information. It may not totally be relevant to as relevant to New York as it is to other regions of the Norfolk Southern network here, but I'll be glad to answer or do my best to answer whatever questions folks may have here.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. That was a great presentation. You know, I'm still learning a lot about freight networks in general, and railroads have always been a bit of a black box. It can be hard to look into from the outside. I had one question, then if other folks have questions, feel free to chime up. You mentioned how Conrail was the most recent Class 1 merger that we've seen, especially in this region. About how long did that process take? You know, we're at almost a year since this merger was first announced. So did Conrail have to do resubmittals for incomplete applications or anything like that?
I don't think so. One big difference with the Conrail application, when I say it was the most recent, it was the most recent for this region. The most recent Class 1 railroad was the Canadian Pacific, Kansas City Southern, that was completed within the last few years. A big difference in the Conrail one was that Conrail was kind of it was almost always seen as a temporary entity. It was created as the Consolidated Rail Corporation as a government railroad in the early 1970s out of the bankruptcies of the 6 Class 1 railroads in the Northeast, including the Penn Central, including the Erie-Lackawanna Railroad, both of which had already been consolidated from other Class 1. So the railroad industry in the Northeast was in shambles by 1972, and these railroads, under regulatory burdens, the changing business climate, competition from the trucking industry, the railroads in the Northeast just all collapsed in bankruptcy. So the government came in to protect the interests of the shippers and said, we're going to create a consolidated rail corporation, Conrail, that will serve with little or no competition for the sole purpose of getting the railroad industry back on its feet. Once that was accomplished 10 years later, in the early 1980s, Conrail was sold off through an IPO and it became a private company. But there was always an understanding that the world could not stay this way with a private company operating with minimal competition. So over the years, both Norfolk Southern and CSX tried to buy Conrail outright, starting in the late 80s, early 90s. And they were told in no uncertain terms by the STB or just government interests, they said, we're not going to let you do this. And the whole purpose here, and that's where it was kind of the result of a deal where the two railroads got together and said, why don't we both acquire Conrail? We'll split it up. It was a complicated process because you kind of have to say who gets what out of this sale. So the process took a long time to get to the point where it was an STB application. But as I recall, the STB process went fairly quickly, and it was then an operational issue. It took a year or more to get through the operational challenges of consolidating consolidating Conrail into the operations of these two other railroads. So we describe it as a 1998-99 merger. I think the formal approval was given in 1998. I think the process started in 1997. But it was 1999. It was about a year before the railroad, the Conrail, was fully operationally ingrained, connected to both of the last one. So I know it's a long answer, and I hope I answered the question. This isn't going to happen overnight. STB process is quick, but when I say quick, meaning they'll have a 45-day public comment period. That clock starts to run, and it runs. I've been an expert witness in an STB proceeding involving a railroad. This was Canadian Pacific out in Chicago about 10 years ago. And this isn't like a court case where it just drags on for years and then delays. And that big clock runs and you jump. You have to get responses filed immediately. So I expect this to go fairly quickly. Once they accept the application, then that 45-day clock runs. And then there are other steps after that. It could take a year.
It looked like that for the previous application filing, it was about a month before they deemed it was incomplete and they needed to resubmit.
Yes.
Is that pretty typical
Yes.
timeline?
Yes, in fact, there was a window here. I didn't just put that date in here because it had already passed. But after this application was filed on April 30th, the STB gave an announcement for I think it was a 2-week window. It may have been May 10th. It was less than 2 weeks. It may have been May 10th for anybody to file a response to say this is not complete. That is missing information. STB has their own view of this, but somebody else may come and say, hey, wait a minute, they overlooked this or they overlooked that. I believe that date for filing that initial quick response about the application itself, not the contents of the application, but the nature of it and the completeness of it. I believe that date has already passed. It's very quick.
Yeah. Which some of our other federal review processes could be that quick.
It's very interesting that you say that because when you think about it, when you have all of these stakeholders involved, and you have an industry that is so crucial to the functioning of the economy at large, not just for their own purpose. Again, the STB doesn't care about the railroads themselves. I shouldn't say that, but their real interest here is, hey, what does it mean for the customers of the railroad? We have to maintain competitive rail service. You're acting in the interest of the customers here. You can't leave businesses out in the lurch here, and it's all private. like the public involvement here is really only in the regulatory process. It's not in the business interactions between the players here. So customers are going to want this to be accepted or rejected as quickly as possible as well.
Makes sense. Does anyone else have any other questions in person or online? All right, well, thank you very much, Tom. If anyone has questions for Tom afterwards, feel free to reach out to me. I can connect you with Tom, or I think Tom had his contact information there on the last slide. So
There you go. All
feel
right.
free to reach out. Awesome. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks again. Hope to see you in person at the next meeting, but we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let me take back control of the screen sharing.
I can. There you go.
Perfect. All right, can everyone see my screen again? I believe you should be able to. Let me get everything on my end working how I want it. Oh, I think I'm sharing now. On screen, okay. So related to that, I was talking to one of the representatives of CSX from our region in the last couple of days, and obviously they're very concerned about the merger. You know, us at the Transportation Council, we take any stance on the proposed merger, but CSX is very concerned about the potential competitive implications. So they shared a couple maps that I thought would be interesting to show. So the one that is up on the screen right now shows the current railroad network of Union Pacific in red, Norfolk Southern in green, and CSX in blue. So you can see Norfolk Southern and CSX share a lot of the same area, and then Union Pacific covers out west along with another Class 1 railroad. And then with the proposed merger, you can now see the proposed UPNS network in red overlaid over the CSX network in blue. You can see that then, the new proposed network, again, it's that transcontinental railroad that CSX is really limited to just here on the eastern coast of the country. So they shared that CSX, they are obviously filing their opinions for the merger, and they have a website that they've put together, a little microsite where people can go get some information, see they have an FAQ available. So if anyone's interested in that, the link is csxstayingontrack.com, and I'll drop that in the chat, and we'll include it in the meeting minutes if anyone is interested. But yeah, there's a lot of potential implications if this merger were to get approved. And so hopefully, that STB process is robust enough that it will address a lot of these concerns.
Do you know if there's any way that, because was it CPKC?
Yep.
Is that not on, that's not on here?
That's not on this map. Yeah, this map was prepared just by
Just CSX.
but just by CSX to show how it would impact their service. But their maps online where you can see all the Class 1
Yeah, I'd be
railroads.
interested to see where, because the port has a shoreline that's a joint venture between CSX and CP.
Mhm.
And it'd be good to know, CSX is obviously highlighted where
Yep.
CP.
Yeah, where their network is. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I love looking at maps of
Yeah.
railroad networks. I think it's very
That's very
interesting to
Do we
see.
have any maps that have just the capital region, like the different carriers?
That's a good question. I think we might, but I would have to dig it up. So I can follow up with you.
Okay, yeah, because that'd be interesting to have a smaller, just
Yeah.
the capital region in terms of what's moving in and out, because I know, Pan Am Rail was acquired by CSX and
Yeah.
so there's some of those.
Yeah, I'll see if we can. We might be able to also put that up on our website, just a little information. And if we can, I'll include that in the meeting minutes too, so everyone can see it.
So you like that?
Yeah, I know. We love maps here.
Yeah, Ethan, just an FYI, when I was doing some research for this presentation, I had tried to track some of those down. New York State DOT has what looks to be a pretty robust online map resource. But I found that some of the layers for the rail network were confusing and may not have been portrayed accurately, so I didn't use them. But you might want to follow up with Dave Rosenberg to see if they have the geo-referenced layers for the rail network.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll definitely reach out to Dave. Awesome. Well, if no one has any more questions about the rail network, we'll move along to some of our discussion items. Stuff from the Transportation Council will be pretty quick. The first one is an update on our superload corridors study. This is something we've been talking about around this table for since before I was here, it's probably about 2 years, later this year. At our last meeting, we shared that we had an RFP that was out. We had been receiving proposals and we're beginning the scoring process. Since then, Creighton Manning Engineering, along with Peak Engineering and Planning for Places, have been selected as the consultant team to conduct this study. So we're still in the very preliminary phases. We're developing a data collection plan and a stakeholder and public outreach plan. If you have not heard from me about participating in the group in some way through the study advisory committee or stakeholder interviews, and you would like to participate, feel free to reach out to me after this meeting. My contact information is up there and at the end of the presentation and in all the emails I'm constantly sending you. So just reach out to me and I'll get you plugged into that. Somehow, we're starting to do some of the route analysis too. So you can see up on the screen right now, we have a map that shows it's a map with some permit data that we got through DOT showing all of the super load kind of routes through the region, and then highlighted in blue is just the over height routes, because those are even more constrained a lot of the time. So we're looking at a lot of different data layers and pulling out lots of pieces of information to do our best analysis that we can. As we're getting this meeting going. That first study advisory committee meeting, which, some of you may have participated in the Superload task force, we're kind of merging that into the study advisory committee. We're expecting that first meeting to be soon. It's looking like it's probably going to be maybe the second week of June, but once we have that meeting date set, we'll be reaching out to people to get it on your calendars. That is all the update for the Superload corridors right now. At a future meeting, we'll probably present more and more information as the study progresses to this group too, just to keep everyone informed. I'm seeing in the chat, David Rosenberg, going back a slide, said DOT does have the rail layers, and the rail map will likely be updated with the ongoing state rail plan. So we'll share that that's available too. So if anyone has anything they'd like to mention about the Superload corridors update, feel free to, or reach out to me anytime if you want status update. All right, I'll turn over to Adam for an update on our Capital District Clean Communities program.
Hi all, so really quickly, just a quick overview. Good news, we've been restored on funding in terms of that, because the federal government has finally decided to move forward with deploying Clean Communities funds to coalitions across the country. So that's to all the 75 plus coalitions across the country. Are restored funds as of April of this year. And so now we're in a year of rebuilding and coming up with a new programming to move forward. So I think it's an exciting year ahead, and we're definitely looking for more interested subject matter experts and members that are interested in alternative fuels and how the Capital Region can look at challenges, opportunities, and ways that we can consider alternative fuels as solutions to at the municipal level, at state and even the transit authority level. And definitely, if you are interested in becoming a member, please reach out to me at amccarl@capitalmpo.org. And just a really quick highlight, recently we attended the Empire State Plaza EV event, which was focused on state fleets, hosted by the Office of General Service and NYPA. And that was a really interesting event because we were able to see like the low-hanging fruit ways that that state agencies are looking to well, right now their focus is on electrification of vehicles. And our goal as the fuel agnostic coalition is to really look at what's the best solution for different scenarios. So that can be anything in the plethora of different types of fuel sources. If EVs happen to be your best solution, we will be certainly helping out with that. And just showing the mission below, just so you have a good idea as well, if you are new to the concept of clean cities and communities. The program's been around since 99, at least at this office, but with this buffer of years here, we're really trying to kickstart and get things re-sparked for a new strong year ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. If anyone has any questions about participating in Capital District Clean Communities, feel free to reach out to Adam or reach out to me and I'll connect you to Adam. Our next update, real quick, in case you somehow haven't seen, Port of Albany Rensselaer is holding their Maritime Summit next Tuesday, May 19th. And, there's gonna be a big variety of speakers, panels, there's gonna be tabling events. We'll be participating from the Capital Region Transportation Council. I'll
Yeah, I
let
was
John share.
Excited to hear that you'll have a expo table
Yeah,
there, so appreciate the support and that you guys are coming down. Yeah, so it's a half-day event, mainly starts like was said in around 8:30, registration, you get there around 8:15. The event will go to about 1:30 PM, 12:30 to 1:30 is gonna be a great lunch and a networking opportunity, so we encourage everybody to stick around for that. And I believe Ethan might have put the website in the chat if possible.
I'll drop that right now.
And that website actually goes through the entire list of the agenda and all the speakers, so I encourage you to take a look. We have some really great speakers lined up. One of which is Beth Ann Rooney, who's the Chief Commerce Officer for the Port of New York and New Jersey. She'll be having a fireside chat with Rebecca Karp from Karp Strategies. We at the port actually worked with Rebecca and her team during an offshore wind economic impact analysis, which was very useful for the region, and we're looking forward to that conversation. And there'll be a lot of great individuals from throughout the port industry, throughout not just New York, but the state. And we're looking forward to learning more about what maritime industry is doing at the current moment, and from a New York perspective as well as abroad. So
Thanks. I know there was an RSVP date of May 7, if people still want to
Yes,
participate, is
please.
that possible?
please continue to just RSVP. That we're really from the food perspective, the more information we have as far as how many attendees, the better. But definitely keep sending them in. I would say if you can get it in before the end of this week, that would be ideal. So
Awesome.
sooner the better.
And RSVP, just email Penny at that
Yes.
email that's up there on the screen right now.
Yep. Yep. And if you want to include kind of where you heard the last minute update from, you can definitely, throw CTRCC and my name in there. So that way Penny's aware of, where these last minute RSVPs are coming from.
Awesome. Thanks, John.
Absolutely.
So now just our regular quick update of our regional planning initiatives. We have a couple of our linkage studies that were recently completed or nearing the end of completion, including our County Route 109 study, our Route 7 corridor study, and then we have a couple of our projects that are just getting off the ground now. So the proposals or the REI is out for our traffic calming master plan in the village of Ballston Spa. And the West Avenue Complete Street Study in the city of Saratoga Springs has begun. And the Project Advisory Committee, I think, has now had their first meeting. But if you're interested in participating in either of those studies, feel free to reach out to me. I can connect you with Martin Pohl, who's running both of those studies. And then just at our last policy board meeting, when we approved our Unified Planning Work Program for this year, we added 2 new studies, including the Aiken Avenue area study in the city of Rensselaer and the County Route 76 study in the town of Stillwater. So those are still very much in the preliminary phase. We'll be working on the RFPs and getting those studies going once our staff time is a little more freed up now that we've completed some other studies. As far as our technical assistance program, we're looking pretty light right now. We've completed most of our technical assistance program activities. I think we're still working on the Albany County Active Transportation Technical Assistance Program. We actually had a public meeting last night for the Russell Road sidewalk portion of that study. The other kind of half of that study, the trails around the Albany airport, is going to get some more attention now that we've gone through that first public meeting. As always, if you're one of our member agencies and have just anything at all that's a little problem area, a little topic of interest for you, feel free to reach out to us, and we have a wide variety of services that we can offer to work with you and help develop some concepts, do some data collection, whatever you need. We're happy to help. And then, the ongoing large efforts, we're still participating as needed in the 378 Pell study. We're doing ADA plan self-evaluations for our member agencies. We have the Superload corridor study, like I mentioned, that is ongoing. Our resilience plan that we're beginning soon, the RFP has been released and we're still collecting proposals for that. And then the household travel survey is still kind of in the works. We're finishing up some of the preliminary data preparation so we can do that travel survey soon. So if you have any questions or interest in any of those studies, feel free to reach out to me. I'll connect you with whoever on our staff is leading those efforts and get you plugged into those. So now it's our regular participant updates section. I'll open up to folks in the room first. If anyone has anything going on, maybe Jasleen can introduce herself since she's just stepped into the role. But tell us about what you're doing at CDRPC and working on.
So like I said, I stepped into the role of the planning and economic development manager. Just sort of getting the hang of things at the moment, be involved with the FTZ. Also, we met briefly with the Port of Albany. So it's full steam ahead. I'll be involved with the EDA grants, and looking forward to another summit that's coming up that's Fuse helps putting up glass for chips. So really looking forward to catching up on all the projects and getting to meet people and to collaborate and be the conduit that CDRPC is in a lot of its work.
Yeah, well, we're excited to have you here around our table, so looking forward to your participation. Anyone online have any updates they would like to share? Feel free to just chime up.
I already shared mine.
Yeah, John already got his.
Hey, yeah, I can chime in here. This is Jacob Beeman from National Grid, and former staff at the Transportation Council, but my first time attending one of these meetings as a stakeholder. So just wanted to chime in, introduce myself for those of you that don't already know me, but also just wanted to give a few updates on some of National Grid's fleet electrification and medium and heavy duty vehicle electrification support programs. So I think, if any of you have kind of followed the EV space, you might be familiar with our Make Ready incentives, but I also wanted to kind of note that we have a lot of different support programs for fleets and medium and heavy duty vehicles that really kind of focus on the planning process as well. So we have our fleet advisory services, which are no cost assessments that we can provide fleet customers to give a better look at what type of capacity is available at your site. And that's looking at the substation, the distribution feeders, and the service transformers. Which is really going to give kind of that first look into, how many vehicles you would be able to electrify, or what type of utility upgrades we might need to support that. We also have a online total cost of ownership tool. So, even if it's something kind of pre-planning phase, if you're interested in electrification, you can start to build out a project, kind of choose from real vehicles that are available today, actual chargers on the market, and their updated costs. So you can, kind of plug in details of your fleet and get an understanding of how much, an electrification project might cost. And then not only on the upfront side, but also plug in kind of your project life cycle and see when that project would kind of pay back in terms of operational cost savings, 5, 10, 15 years. So a really cool interactive tool that you can use to start kind of evaluating fleet electrification. On the infrastructure side, we have our medium and heavy duty Make Ready pilot program. So that's an incentive program that's available for specifically for medium and heavy duty vehicle charging. So class 3 through 8 vehicles over 10,000 pounds would be eligible for this incentive program. And that's going to provide 90% of utility side costs. So if you need to bring in a new electrical service or upgrade an electrical service to charge those vehicles, that program would cover 90% of those costs. That would, that would be a charge that comes from National Grid directly to the customer. That would typically, be 100% borne on the customer. We can cover up to 90% of those costs. And when a project is located in a disadvantaged community, we can also cover up to 90% of the customer side costs. So that would be the the work to bring the power from the utility transformer to the base of the chargers. So that would be trenching, conduit runs, wiring, as well as the design and engineering that would go towards a project like that. Substantial make-ready incentives available as well. And then on the operational cost side, we do have specific rates for electric vehicle charging that are going to help reduce the demand charges associated with charging these vehicles. So, I've got a little one-pager here that I can drop in the chat, but happy to discuss more if anyone has any questions, or we can chat a bit offline. But I guess one last thing I wanted to mention, if anybody has been following kind of the EV space or the incentive space, you may have heard that some of the National Grid make-ready incentives are currently on pause. And that would be only for our light duty make-ready program. So if you hear any conversation about, National Grid incentives, being on pause or being subscribed, that does not apply for medium and heavy duty vehicle charging. And we still have plenty of other support programs available as well for electrification. So, good to see everyone, and happy to answer any questions.
I actually had a question regarding that. As far as, have you ever done any work with like port infrastructure or equipment, like forklifts? Like we have a fleet of forklifts that we might want to get an idea on if we wanted to electrify, how that would look.
Yeah.
Or maybe mobile harbor.
So right now our incentive program is only available for on-road vehicles, with the exception of like yard trucks. So yard trucks would be eligible. But I think that we would still be, we could still do a fleet assessment and help you take a look at, kind of the capacity that would be available at your site for that. I don't see a problem with that. And then, also the other thing too is, mentioning that incentive program is it's a pilot program. We do feel that, probably about this time next year, we would be seeing some type of full scale, medium and heavy duty or fleet focused make ready program, which, could be expanded to include things like off-road vehicles. But yeah,
Great.
definitely, I think worth further conversation to see, what we could provide you guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Jacob. That was a great update. Glad to see you here on our screen again.
Yeah, good to see you.
Anyone else have any questions for Jacob or any other updates? Going once, going twice. All right. That is it for this meeting then. Our remaining meetings for the year are August 12 and November 18. Those dates are pretty accurate, but might shift a week or two if things come up. But as always, we'll send out the meeting agenda 1 week in advance so everyone is aware of what's going on here. So with that said, thank you everyone for attending, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks.